child wanted a father's love and care and concern, but it was always somewhere else taking care of other people's children or children that had no parents, while he neglected his own. Mistakes like that, friend, are awesome. The fourth mistake that we make is what we call the unrestrained curiosity mistake. It's a mistake made because we want sensation, because we have desires, or maybe because of the demonic influence that plays upon our mind and our spirit. But we want to learn and find out more. It's like Saul, who wanted to find out about Samuel. He went to a witch at Endor and asked the witch to bring up Samuel from the grave. And what happened was a demonic spirit took on the personality of Samuel. And because he did that, he was condemned and he died shortly afterwards. I think of Samson, who, because of wanting something more, curious to find out things, what it would be like to have someone who was not a covenant woman, gave himself to Delilah and lost the ministry that God had for him. When we go beyond the bounds of propriety, the bounds of decency, the bounds of God's word, when we go beyond what God instructs us, and we want to find out what's like to do something wrong, even for a temporary season, then we are courting disaster. We can lose everything in the process. The last mistake that we make is a blind spot mistake. It's a mistake that you don't even know you have. You don't see it, but it is there all the time. You forget it. You don't sense it. In the midst of what you're doing, you don't realize you got a blind side, a blind spot. Sometimes it takes a friend to show it to you. Someone will point it out to you, but it's sometimes hard to see because we are so set in our own ways. I think of Paul, the great apostle, who had everything going for him, but he had a blind spot. John Mark traveled with him at a period of time, and he got cold feet. It was Silas and John Mark and Paul that were a trio doing God's work, but one day, John Mark got cold feet. And John Mark came and said, I've got to go home to mommy. I can't take the rigors of missionary work. I can't stand it. I need to go home. And so he went. When John Mark repented of that and came back later on the next missionary journey and said, Paul, give me another chance, Paul wrote him off. And Barnabas came along and intervened and tried to say, give this guy another chance. But Paul refused it. He was a more of a choleric person. One mistake and out you go. He never realized that that young boy called John Mark wrote the second gospel. And at the end of his life, only then did Paul realize. He wrote to Timothy and said, bring John Mark to me. Why? Same words. He is now profitable to me in the ministry. Sometimes we hastily make judgments. But we can't realize. Because we have such strength in our lives, we are not open to correction. Paul refused. I'm sure he might have spent many days in the later years of his life regretting why he was so hard on a young person. He refused to give him another chance. Am I speaking to someone like this? You're unwilling to give someone another opportunity, unwilling to forgive someone for a blunder they made, unwilling to do something that will give the person another chance to make his life worthwhile. We often rub some people and rub them away when God himself wants to use them. I think of Galatians chapter 2 where Peter was double-minded. He ate Jews, but when he wanted to go to the Gentiles, but then because of the Jews' pressure, he refused to join himself with Gentiles. It's always the blind spot. We don't see it, the inconsistency. We have one thing at one time, something else at another time. Blind spots. I'm glad God sees it all. In Psalms 31, you find that God sees us realistically. He views us realistically. He knows what we are made of. He knows the problem in verse 7. He has seen my trouble. He has seen my affliction. And God sees us thoroughly. What you do is not going to catch God off guard. The mistake you made, He knew well before you made it that you were going to make it, because He's God. He saw you from eternity past. And He saw the mistake and the blunder you made. He knows it all. And therefore, He looks at you thoroughly. He looks at you realistically. He looks at you with compassion. Secondly, He treats you. He gives you space. In verse 8, He gives you another chance. I'm glad God is the God of the second chance, or third chance, or the fifth chance, or maybe the 100th chance, because there is no sin in your life that God cannot forgive. There's no mistake you can make that God can eradicate. There's no failure in your life that God cannot redeem. God can do it. He gives you the space to do it. He enlarges the room. He gives you time to do it all. The third thing that God does, that He instructs you. He teaches you. How does He instruct you? On the basis that you can trust Him. When you've made a mistake, turn it over to God and say, Lord, I made that mistake. I can trust You to handle it. I don't know how to handle it. I can't even handle it. I can't unravel the things I've done, but I'm willing to wait Your timing. I'm willing to wait for You to do it. And God does it in the space of a lifetime, because all your time are in His hands. The psalmist said, David said, the times that I have are in Your hands. God has the ability to make time, in the basis of time and in the midst of your lifespan, God can correct those things and make things well. And God doesn't do it publicly. In verse 20 of the chapter, He does it in the secret place, in quietness. He knows that what you need is that kind of confidence that God can handle your problem. And He handles it with love. He handles it with understanding. He's not like others that will judge and criticize and condemn you. And if you ask someone for help, they will tell you 17 sermons, 7 ways, and 6 antidotes. But when you come to God, He says, look, I know the mistakes. The Bible tells you He's the high priest who's touched with the feelings of our infirmities. He knows our weaknesses. He knows our hurts. He knows everything that matters to life. And because He faced it and overcame it, He is in a position to help you. Am I talking to someone who's made mistakes today? Don't live in them. Don't let it condemn you. Seek God. If you have to be forgiveness, ask forgiveness. If there has to be restoration, make the steps you need. There is one that will stand by you at all times so that your mistakes can be turned into a message.
Thank you for tuning in to another challenging and inspiring message that will change your life. If you would like to contact Dr. Abel Thomas, write to the address on your screen.